Well, hello everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to the Rattlecast. We're the biggest freewheeling live stream poetry podcast on the planet, in your ears and on your laptops. Our guest for episode number 343 is Rattle Poetry Prize finalist Lisa Wells. She'll be here in a few minutes, but before we get, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been a continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I know you do too, so please do click on the like button and share. Make sure you're subscribed. Ring the bell for notifications. Whatever you can do to help spread poetry around the planet would be much appreciated. Now we're going to start out like we always do with our Poets Respond poet. And it's a familiar face here. Alexander Bilzerian has had a few poems in Poets Respond now, and also the Ekphrastic Challenge. And here he is. Hey, Alex, how you doing?
Good. How are you? Yeah, pleasure to be on.
Yeah, definitely a pleasure to have you again. And you have so many interesting poems. It's almost it's I was mentioning in your acceptance letter there that it's sort of astonishing every week, or how often that you submit with such widely disparate poems and styles, and really digging deep into topics. I mean, first of all, you must read a lot, I think, right? Is that part of your strategy?
Yeah, I think the ratio of reading to writing is probably 4 to 1 or so, in my case at least.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so what was this story that triggered this poem? And it's something that I hadn't heard about, a deeper news story that deserves more attention.
Yeah, so there's 1,100 Afghans trapped in this kind of holding pen essentially in Qatar, that they helped the U.S. during the Afghan war, and we basically abandoned them as a country. They're being relocated potentially to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and they don't speak Arab there, or Arabic there. It's kind of a unbelievable situation in my mind. How we could abandon our own allies that risk their lives to translate and help, our soldiers on the ground during those times. And the idea of being an interpreter in one of these wars is also kind of a big, motivating factor behind this one for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, why don't you go ahead and read it? It's a powerful poem, Tongue, which was the poem of the day on Sunday.
Tongue. The throat is a country, and the tongue its only passport. For 20 years, he carried the question across the soft border of his palate and brought back the answer, sticky on his teeth. Interrogator and detainee met inside him the way two rivers meet inside a third that is neither. The word for water in one mouth became the word for water in the other only by passing through the wet dark of his. He learned to hold a sentence the way his grandmother carried coals on a shovel from house to house in winter, cupping the live heat from her own breath so her breath would not kill it. And he did this in rooms whose windows had been painted over, and he did this in the back of trucks, and he did this at checkpoints where the dust laid a second language on everyone's lips. And afterwards, having set the day's freight down, he went home and sang to his daughter in the older tongue, the one that did not have to pass inspection, the one whose vowels were the shape of her mother's name. And he believed, this is the part he cannot now unbelieve, that two mouths could share one sentence and the sentence be a kind of mercy, that a bridge was a bridge and not a throat a man could be fed into. Some of them learned his name, and some of them meant what they said, and the paperwork was real, and the list was real, and the helicopters were real, and the not being on them was also real. The not being on them was the realest thing. And now, in the house in the lane behind the market, where the neighbors have begun to look at him the way you look at a door, deciding whether to knock or break it down, his mouth is closed, the mouth through which for 20 years one country spoke itself into another. And in the next room, his daughter is practicing. She is saying butterfly. She is saying Wednesday. She is saying I am from. And he can hear her shaping the shapes he taught her, tongue to the ridge behind the teeth, lips just parted, the small held breath before the voiced consonant. And he stands in the doorway where she cannot see him, and he does not tell her to stop, and he does not tell her to continue, because the mouth that carried the word for 20 years has no word for what he would say to her, which predates the mouth. And she is saying, Father, and her mouth is open, and his mouth is open, and no sound comes. She laughs at her own mouth because the word came out crooked, and tries again. and the house holds them both inside its listening, the way a throat holds what it cannot yet swallow or say.
Yeah, a powerful poem, and so glad to raise awareness of that story too, which is one that is definitely off the regular path and shouldn't be. Thanks so much, Alex, for sharing that
Thank
and
you.
for always contributing such great poems. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, that was Alexander Bilzerian with Tongue. That was yesterday's poem of the day on rattle.com. If you have any poems about current events, anything that's going on right now, you want to respond to it poetically, do so by Friday at midnight. Go to rattle.com. Up under content, you'll see Poets Respond. Submit your poems there, and we publish at least one every Sunday. And also, scroll down to the very bottom and sign up for our daily poem by email. If you don't yet, put your email in there, and you'll get a poem like that every day. We're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Lisa Wells. So sit tight, and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Like I said, today's guest is Lisa Wells, our Rattle Poetry Prize finalist this year. That poem, The Accounting, which many of you will remember well. Lisa Wells is a poet, essayist, and documentarian. She's the author most recently of The Fire Passage, which was selected by Diane Seuss as the winner of the Levis Poetry Prize from Four Way Books. Her debut poetry collection, The Fix, won the Iowa Poetry Prize. She's the author of a book of nonfiction, Believers, Making Life at the End of the World, which was a finalist for the 2020 PEN E.O. Wilson Literary Science Writing Award. So that's a lot of fun to talk about. She's taught for the University of Iowa, the University of Arizona, Portland State University, Yale, N.U.S., and it currently serves as co-editor of the Kuhl House Poets Series at the University of Iowa Press. And here she is, Lisa Wells. Hey, Lisa. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely my pleasure. I always love having, especially those Rattle Poetry Prize winners and finalists on, because it's, I love the process of reading entirely blind, having no idea who the poets are. And, there's this long process of cycling through, and then certain poems are like rooting for, and they rise up and some fall out. It's a really fun process. And it's cool to put faces to that later. So thanks for being here. Let's start out, though, with an earlier poem from your book, The Fix. Do you want to read that first?
Sure. So this is Chore Wheel. It's from The Fix, which was my first book, and it's sort of highly updated and improved version of my graduate thesis from Iowa. So, yeah, Chore Wheel. Consulting the pie of pastels, I discover it's Monday. The garbage bin is tipped on two wheels and driven down the walk by the grave valet. In pajamas, pale blue silk stuffed into my boots and zipped into the down parka. An ambulatory cloud. I don't care what the neighbors think. I will meditate long on these pubic weeds tangled on a mound of hollowing snow. In the bedroom, the stain of last night's jag evaporates from the pillowcase. I'm visited nightly by a writhing courtesan of the double malt, a blear year, year of the drought and the vortex, year of my birthday, predictably, of the blighted ovum. I've been dispossessed for some time now. In the street, an icy wind bats at my drawstrings, and my hands, I notice, are cupped, calving the light.
Yeah, so that was a chore wheel from The Fix, Lisa Wells' first book. And Lisa, so you entered poetry from an angle, it seems, at least looking through your bio, because there was film and documentaries and things like that first, at least chronologically, it seems like.
That actually came later.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah, but a lot of other things came first, like bartending, baristaing, production assistant on films, so kind of lackeying for films. I had a lot of gigs for a long time before I finally, got my shit together.
So tell us, what was that journey like through all those different jobs? Like, how did you find poetry as a thing that you wanted to do? And I got, like, what was the timeline like from the working in other mediums and things like that too?
Yeah, I don't know who's listening right now, but anecdotally, I'll say a lot of the poets that I've known in life had sort of similar. I mean, of course, occasionally you meet the oddball poet who like knew that they were a poet right away and maybe went to good schools and published early. But I think like a lot of people, I came across poetry in strange settings and really like my first love affair with it began with like coffee shop readings and sort of the more, not slam wasn't really a thing, but like the kind of beret wearing coffee shop open mic situation. So it was a kind of an egalitarian introduction, I will say. And then I started just reading around, and I had a very weird education initially in that way because I was reading, contemporary poets that I would find at the library or on the shelf. I worked at the coffee shop inside Powell's for a period of time, and
really?
I would, haunt the stacks on my breaks. And then every once in a while I would pick up the Aeneid or something like that and not really know anything about the context, having like no education in the canon. And I think I don't know, maybe worth saying just because all of those different tonal registers and rhythms and constructions kind of had equal weight in my mind as a punk rock high school dropout. And it meant that I think I didn't struggle as much with the anxiety of influence that more classically trained poets do. Yeah.
Do you remember?
So that was the beginning.
Yeah. Well, do you remember the first time you sort of encountered a poem or either read or something you wrote that led you to feel like this is something I want to take seriously? Was there some specific poem that like lit it up for you?
I don't know that I immediately connected it to my future or my own like eventual work, but when I was 12 or 13, I got a copy of it was like a collected of Sylvia Plath, and I had the Disquieting Muses underlined in sparkle pen, and that just seems like you can still sort of feel that haunting my work today. So that was an early one. And then when I was turned on to Dennis Johnson's poems, like a lot of people have read his novels, but when I kind of encountered his poetry first. And that work really sparked something. And I think probably like lent me courage to try, in part because this sort of, I don't know, atmospheric ephemera in those poems was like the world I lived in. I mean, it's the strip malls and people drinking too much and just like strange human gestures. And yeah, it was sort of, it felt familiar and strange at the same time. And that was appealing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so your new book, The Fire Passage, is is very different from the Rattle Poetry Prize winning poem. The Accounting it's one long sort of epic narrative surreal poem that moves through a lot of space and a lot of topics. Can you tell us how that book came to be and sort of describe it for readers who aren't familiar with it yet?
Yeah. I will say, you might have heard it in the first poem, the work that I used to get into the Iowa Writers Workshop was like later in life. I mean, I was almost 30. Was much more sort of in the vein of, I don't know, there's not really a name for this, but maybe a little bit more gettable. Poems that sort of have a nominal subject, and then there's a subverting of that subject or a turn and some kind of epiphanic ending, which I'm not knocking, but had absorbed that way of writing. And my first book does that a lot more, I would say. And then I got really sick. I mean, there is a story here. I left grad school for my first job in Singapore, and I got really sick on a class trip to Myanmar, and I never recovered. It was like a full system meltdown. And I was living alone on the 7th floor of a brand new dormitory at this university. And it was like I was haunting this building. The library didn't have very many books in it yet because they had just opened this campus. And so even the stacks were sort of empty, except for a handful of books here and there that they were teaching that first term. And so I took them all, and it was like the history of ecology and the history of Western medicine and all of these books that were, I didn't have anyone else to talk to. So they were speaking to my experience and I to theirs, or to their information. And it all kind of went into the Rube Goldberg machine of this experience of isolation and illness. And at the same time, I was feeling a little salty maybe about, I mean, I had a great time and I had great teachers at Iowa, but there is a kind of bias toward the canon. And so after several years of just like not really getting to read any women or not reading many women, I felt, I don't know, like, why can't I write an epic? Little old me from Aloha, Oregon, high school dropout, with no like publication history to speak of. Why not? I'm just going to do it. And so the book emerged from that in a sort of a fever dream. And I think you can feel, I mean, I love The Wasteland. I love all those books that I was bucking against, sort of rebelling against your parents or something. And I definitely feel like Eliot and Dante and, all of those books where you descend into the underworld and face a sort of, chimera, a hallucination of figures from life. That model I had internalized somehow. So that's the story of that book. And no one wanted to touch it when I was first sending it out. I think people just didn't know what to do with it. It seemed too weird. And then 10 years later, I like dusted it off and I'm like, I'm going to submit this again. And right away, Diane picked it for that prize. So I feel like I got very lucky because it easily could have been in the dustbin. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is really interesting. Was there something that made you sort of dust it off and send it out? Was there an inciting incident for that?
I think I was just curious. Like I saw the folder and I was like, God, what is it even in here? I don't even remember, and I went back through, and then the great thing about leaving something in a drawer for 5 years is the problems become evident. So I say I sent it out and it won a prize, but really what I did was I cut the poems mercilessly, and they became much smaller and more condensed and clearer in their imagery. Less, I think the initial drafts were very spoken and kind of rambling, and they were long and unwieldy. And I'm sure that helped make it readable.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. That's a great introduction to the book. I think we should read a passage from it now.
Okay. I'll just read sort of the opening salvo, which is they're broken up into numbered sections, and the first section is 0. They prefer that I speak plainly, no tricks. I can sympathize. I was sick, plainly. I had my symptoms. Physicians of every age and bedside manner tested my blood, stool, saliva, and with a look that becomes familiar to medical mysteries and the malingering alike, they communicated their skeptical pity, as if the wound were in my mind. And it was. But it was elsewhere too. Bathed in the light of their disbelief, I could touch the whole history. So the wound is a window. Yes and no. 1. Clicked home an unknown way through the city, past the bread factory's glassy nave where conveyors parade whole white loaves and acrid sweetness humps the air. Is this the waking world? Alive in the shadows of great panelocks, clean as sun-bleached femurs, and the song of haggling in the stalls. Odor of syrup and unwashed sex unlocked from hunks of perspiring malum. Which of our hands fingered this fruit first? 2. I recall the shaggy seer said, "Truth is the God that wants it." I held that song in my ears to the exclusion of all others. Mists rolling over the headland bring trembling to the palm fronds, raise disinterious floods to the lips of bridges ornately carved. Tell me, who's going to love us now that we hasten the epic? 3. Smocked in a paper bib, I packed a rattle in my lung to the sanitarium. The delicate nurse spooned my soil into a vial. It will culture in a day. Just think, something of me grows in silence, even as we speak. It's a godly feeling to flip the light switch, watch the frightened roaches scatter, shake the roaches from my loafers and slip into the corridor for refreshment. Change, jangling, spooks the other patients from their rooms. I love the way the can slams the vendor's internal workings. And the artifice of the rectory impressed upon my eye a phrase. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. 4. Replace the days with such phrases for one who tramps in the midst of illness. Turned out by the body, malignancy's forced pilgrimage. First, they will lead us down a hall and fit us in their nightmare chair, tied off to the metronomic drip of radiant chemical. Friend, we die, but do not die alone. It comes for all. It comes for all. 5. And we fear the troubled hours of earth, to be ridden by that famous tide of rapturous woe. But this is just the gap between the platform and the door. The dead are, at this very moment, speeding back.
Yeah, so that was the opening section from The Fire Passage by Lisa Wells. And it's really interesting. In your poem from Rattle, you start off by talking about the difficulty of saying things plainly, and you just have to get it out plainly. And then here you start, they prefer that I speak plainly, no tricks, I can sympathize. And so much of this book especially is sort of getting at the, I don't know, like there's both a desire and a suspicion for that kind of sort of storytelling that's more straightforward. You know, it's like, I can't tell the whole story because it's too complicated. And so I'm curious how you go about negotiating that, and how, you said you moved to condensing and sort of fragmentizing the collection, getting it tighter and tighter into this sort of form. What do you think is gained and what do you think is lost by that? And do you feel like, what are your reasons for moving in that direction, I guess I should say?
Oh, that's a great question. All the parts of it. Let me speak first about suspicion, which I think, like anyone who lives long enough and tries to sort of be reflexive in their thinking about themselves and their work, I feel at once, um, I don't know, I don't feel cynical about art. It's one of the things worth living for. Um, and I think it can do a lot. And in the same hand, I can hold the power of story in its plainest sense, like the ordering of events and how we make meaning from events. I'm a nonfiction writer too, and I'm not very poetical in my nonfiction. Um, but the beauty of poetry, I mean, one of the beauties of poetry is that it doesn't have to abide the rules of narrative, clarity, whatever it can if it chooses, and that's great too. Um, but there's so much of human experience that gets left out in a narrative, um, that gets left out when we, I don't know, strip the parts that aren't doing much, which was like a common thing to find on the workshop sheet. Like, this isn't doing much. Um, and part of the permission I gave myself in the initial writing was like, don't worry about doing, or if you are going to worry about doing, then make it count. In other words, instead of a lot of highfalutin rhetoric about the power of poetry to save your life, treat it like it's true. What if you could write your way through this baffling, confusing, painful, unmooring experience and say everything that comes through? And so that was great for the drafting. But I think, the condensing was really about moving less toward sense or like narrative clarity and more toward taking those little moments, those pieces of the spell, and really making them kind of condensed and shine so that they pack more punch. So even if I'm reading this book and I'm like, I don't know what the hell she's talking about, I'm still going to have a moment after a moment where and yet I'm like in an image, or I'm in sort of the Greek chorus part of it, and maybe I'm feeling something. I don't know if I've gotten too far afield of the heart of your question, but
No, nothing's too far. Any tangent's great, but that's great too. And I was wondering, with that in mind, how much you were thinking about the reader while you were, editing, I guess mostly these poems to become more sort of mysterious and kind of deeper and more fragmentary like that. Were you careful enough to keep connecting threads and sort of returning every once in a while to like certain touchstones so that we don't get lost along the way? Because I think, one of the problems with writing that is fragmentary like that is that you end up with a lot of like submissions from people who just, the poems don't really mean anything, and you can't get there. I mean, I'm sure they do deep in some portion, but there's like no way to access it. There's like no bridge to cross, and you're just like, okay. And so having a thread to follow is so important. So how much were you aware of that while you were writing and thinking about being helpful to the reader at the same time as you were trying not to lose the complexity that you were gaining by having this form?
yeah. I mean, I think this is the logic of, I mean, it's not like it was a conscious decision. When I started writing, it was more like channeling something, but it turns out it helps to have a single subjectivity on a journey, right? It's like, thank you, Whitman. Like we can keep saying I, and then that continues to be the handhold, and we already know that we're sort of in hell, like we went into the underworld. And so as with the, so many religious texts where we're being like walked through the valley of the shadow of death, like anything that arises there is within context. And so there is sort of an implied logic that I think the reader can follow. I mean, I don't know. You can never read your own work as if you're an outsider. But in terms of how much it matters to me, what matters to me is that someone on the other end is having an experience where it feels like there's stakes, like there's something being risked, that that the writer has given their all in honing their observational capacities and description so that they're not wasting my time with a lot of blah, blah, blah. Because, like, this is one of the hardest things to talk about as an editor, as I'm sure you know. Like, you get a lot of submissions where you're like, this just feels like not only does it not make any sense, it's just like there's no stakes, right? It's like cotton candy or something. There's no there when you start digging in. And it's hard to even know how or why that's the case. But I think there was sort of this false battle between like the experimental poets and the, more narrative or lyric poets. And I just think it's kind of manufactured. Like what connects the greats is not really like how gettable they were. Because like you can love Mary Oliver and love Alice Notley at the same time,
Yeah. So what is it that connects them? That's always a great question. There is something really mysterious about the way we connect through the music of speech, so what is the thread that connects such disparate poets that makes it the same thing even? Because, I get people mad all the time because, it's not a poem unless it rhymes, you get that sometimes. And you get,
oh, wow,
it's
really?
not a haiku unless it's
awesome.
in the 5-7-5, which is, obviously completely wrong. And you get, if this makes no sense, and so there's all sorts of ways, and yet somehow it's all poetry, and having an eclectic magazine, we have prose poems, we have haiku, we have sonnets, like all mushed together. And the question of what that thread is, what makes it a poem, is a big question. So what is that for you? What is the magic?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's so fascinating, though, that feedback. I'm like amazed that somebody would be like a hardliner with what I assume is end rhyme.
Oh, they definitely are, yeah.
Wow. There's this line as an aside in John Jeremiah Sullivan's great book on essays, Pulphead, book of essays, Pulphead, where he talks about like, I don't know, some kind of town hall where this man gets really upset about this historical detail, and he says it was thrilling that they cared, and that's kind of how I feel because poetry is just so marginal. It's like books in general are. In spite of all of the kind of pretenses surrounding it and all the romance, it's like that we have fewer and fewer readers every year. It's just a fact. And poetry is sort of like the most marginal of all. And I just love that people get fired up about any aspect.
Well, I have to say they get fired up because we published this poem instead of the one that they sent in.
Yeah, that's probably part of it too.
That is the source.
Oh, I remember those days, man. I mean, I was hitting the submissions hard for many years before anybody took anything. So keep at it, guys. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's kind of the magic. I have a book of essays coming out in February about my life as a poet, and just how I think like the longer I I mean, it is sort of vocational, there's like, it's a practice that you keep showing up to. And the longer I do it, the less I understand it. And like the happier I feel when I'm making the work, I don't know. I mean, I think some of it is, I really do think is about the unique vision of the writer, no matter what medium they're working in. And by that, I don't mean visionary, like they're doing something really pizzazzy. I mean that there's something very specific about how they encounter the world, and then whether or not they can, I don't know, sort of see the numinous in whatever it is that they're observing and then give it back to us. I mean, Adam Phillips says art increases the available store of reality. And I think that's the feeling I have when I read a poem that I love, no matter who wrote it, where I feel that I've been given my experience back to me, but through totally different eyes. And so, the feeling of it, it's like hard to describe, but when you've taken it in, because it changes the way you re-enter the world. It changes the way that you understand yourself in that moment, you know? And that all sounds very highfalutin. It can happen in like a funny poem. It doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't always have to be like the most soaring topic. Like Dennis Johnson is a great example of that. This is a person who was deeply religious in his approach to, you know, kind of the vulgar elements of the world, such that you can like see a person drinking a 40 in a hot parking lot and feel that like God is there, you know, like not any particular God, but like that the sacred is available in that place. And that's the stuff I love. I love when it cuts against whatever we're supposed to think is sacred, you know?
Yeah. Well, I definitely agree. I like to think of it as increasing the resolution on our experience, you know, and you can't do that without cleaving things apart. So there's some kind of, you know, danger in that at the same time. Let's see. I wanted to
wait. Can I ask you a follow-up? Tell me more about that. What is the cleaving?
Well, that's how you increase the resolution, right? You divide up, you know, and that's really what our brains are doing from birth. You know, first you have the, you know, mother, not mother is your only distinction. You know, you don't even know you exist if you look at like Lacanian psychology, you know, and then you realize you do, and it's like the first shock and the first trauma. And then you're dividing everything up more and more into more and more detail. But to get to a higher resolution, you have to cut things apart. You know, that's the only way to turn 2 pixels into 248 is by slicing them up, you know? And so that's how and that's what art does, I think, is increase that the range of experience by looking finer and finer in detail, you know?
Wow, that is fascinating. I love that formulation.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
So I wanted to ask. We're going to read another section from the fire passage, but I want to talk a little bit first because we're doing sort of like 2 long sections of this about the way that it relates to your nonfiction book, Believers, because it feels in a way, and I didn't read Believers, I have to confess. I mean, I just read the description, but it feels like a companion to it, like they're like siblings in one, or maybe this is like a poetic release after the experience of Believers or something like that. There's this whole, you know, the ecology and that is all wrapped up in both books. And so I'm curious how they relate and if you see them as like different avenues for similar sort of topics and feelings.
Yeah. Well, I had like part of Believers. So Believers is a book where each chapter follows a different person or community that is sort of radically approaching the problems of species loss and climate change. Radically, maybe they've completely changed the way that they live. And they're living in these off-grid communities that are totally self-sufficient and then doing like education, or they're doing land remediation, they're reversing desertification. So the thing that all of these people have in common is that they're completely uncompromising in their devotion to turning sickness and death into beauty and life, you know? Mm-hmm. And that was appealing to me as a person, like many of us, who was feeling hammered by bad news. But also because I don't think I'm like more omnivorous and lazy than them. So I don't have that same level of commitment, you know, I'm more of an observer of the world, I think. And, but I'm very interested in it. But some of it was also about being a kid who dropped out of high school and went to wilderness survival school because I thought the collapse of civilization was imminent. And like learning to take the good from that experience and also like parsing that from the kind of cult-like political ethos that forms around that. So anyway, having steeped in that stuff at the same time, it was inevitable that it was going to come out sideways in the fire passage. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's interesting because the way they marketed the book of nonfiction, Believers, it was like, this is a book about action and hope, which it kind of is, but really it's a book about first principles and like how we orient to who we are as people and what our places on the planet. Like, what is our ecological niche? Maybe we actually have a purpose here that is good. Like, we're here to feed certain elements of our ecology. So that was like the hopeful part, but it wasn't like, just here's 100 things you can do in a year to, reduce and recycle or whatever. So the fire passage, though, was born of really living in climate catastrophe. And Lydia Millett talks about this. There's no genre, there's no environmental writing anymore because we're all living in it. It's realistic. It's just like narrative realism to include a massive wildfire and smoke in the West. You've probably lived through it. I've lived through it a few times. At the time that I was writing the fire passage, I was living in Singapore, where this was before COVID and before these massive wildfires in the west of the US. But these slash and burn operations in Indonesia were sending like tons of smoke into Singapore every year. And so people were already living in N95s. And it was like, later in retrospect, it felt sort of like a preview of these massive earth-changing events that we were heading into, because I was there in 2015. And then a few years later, there we were. Yeah. So I don't know. It's hard to talk about systemic health collapse without seeing this or feeling this resonance with what was happening all around me in the environment, and not just there. I mean, all over the planet, everywhere I've lived, there's been some environmental catastrophe at some point, there's no outrunning it. Although people do try.
Yeah. I saw or read something about how leave no trace, that kind of concept of let's have the smallest footprint as possible, is not enough, and that's sort of what Believers has in mind. What do you mean by that, and how does that apply more broadly to life and life as a poet?
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem with leave no trace, it's not just like that doesn't go far enough. It's like, it's kind of a sad way to orient to the world. I don't even want to say the natural world. I mean, a lot of my critique of this concept has been leveled by others, but it really comes out of this idea that I inherited, maybe you did too, from the great naturalists who wrote about these cathedrals of wilderness that we venture into in order to cleanse our spirits and have religious epiphany, but then we come back to our everyday lives. The more, sort of like, I think for most of human history, the way that we related to the natural world was just the world. It's where we lived. It's how we made our living. And, if you go back far enough in anyone's history, their people lived in some kind of symbiosis with their environment. And usually that meant not just like taking as little as possible, but finding ways to feed and give life to that which gives you life. And so it's a positive feedback loop where you're growing more and more life. In Oregon, California, this part of the world where we live, part of the reason why it was called the Garden of Eden by these early settlers is because indigenous peoples were like incredible gardeners. It wasn't by accident. It's because there were all of these ingenious technologies in place for increasing biodiversity with everything that you did. So I don't know, how does that relate to poetry? I think that's art. Like, I get so tired of having these conversations about, like, what should a poem do and why should we care? I don't care if you care. A poem should create more life. A poem should give us a moment where we're like more here. I don't think it has to do anything. I don't think it needs to earn any money. I don't think it needs to prove its right to exist. And I don't think any of us really need to prove our right to exist. Maybe that's my like hackneyed secular spiritual complex coming through, but yeah.
Well, let's hear another section from the fire passage.
Okay. Is it Eden I long for? A bayou at dusk, glitzy with fireflies, where rising tides arouse the wharves. I'm engirdled in the plastic rings of every sixer I ever shotgunned, reliving the all-day drunks, fucked thrice before sundown. My nostalgia stumps me. In life, I was rigid. I had a treatment plan. I had a prism. It bent the light. I mistook it for vision. At last, peeled back the cataract to admit to my iris this image of slender black branches stroked by lichen. Lord, what I have loved was frail, but freighted with deep time. My first language was memory, the skin of my face, my manuscript. Should I keep reading? That was what we planned on.
Yeah. Why don't you read a little bit more? Yeah.
Okay. Thought I could find the one that's maybe I'll start with the third zero. I locked the door on the 7th floor of the otherwise empty dormitory and appraised through its window the grid below. Activity populated the aperture, but even that resisted conclusion. I don't mean this figuratively. I mean there's a window in a locked room on the tower's 7th floor, and it's high enough to wreak actual havoc. I mean, it would be possible to impose a narrative conclusion on my confusion of symptoms. Plainly, I both lived in terror of my disease and daydreamed of dying, an unoriginal paradox. I lived in terror and I loved the world. A fire meanwhile rising. In order to test the tensile strength of the resource chain, we sowed a housebroken seed and sprouted the singularity. Blight latched the new buds, peril unwound in strangling vines. My mother called it widowmaker, that blackened snag that forked my sight and hatched the spore that mapped this archipelago of blood into my handkerchief. I longed to live again, in a murmur of larvae, of bioluminescence, in dendrical arms of radiolaria. An ordinary being should be consecrated. It does get happier toward the end, you know. The world does come back.
Do you want to read one toward the end like that?
Yeah, let's find a happier one. I do feel like it's important to, if you go through hell, to come out the other side, because it's not really fair to the reader. I'll just read the last section. That which so loved the scorpion speaks now in the browsing of the saplings, in cicadas' swollen unison, tremors in the skin of the milk. Is the beam of the maglight sweeping the woods beyond the off-ramp, its broken strobe alighting on the beloved's recovered brow, and how it staggers. It whispers against the lips of bottles, swims in the vasculature of millipedes, shoots raw into the coppice, crowned by orchids, bromeliads, upon a fallen limb's decay, upon twin monarchs helical lifting to wake again the sprouting bed. In soft soil blankets it churns, it hums among detritivores, with paste of sawdust and sweet saliva it papers over the gaps in the mound, whose bacterial dance is vast transubstantiation, who entered the steps of the human migration, trailing fruit trees and macaques, that which picks through smoldering rubbish on the banks of the new world, holy scavenger, pray the deep green palms adapted to darkness, praise now pollinators, the blind roots deeply probing, red sexed hibiscus lanterns and symbiotic wasps, lower than mimosa. Come you now, mimosa, do not shrink from that which raised the scab, will fertilize the disturbance. Already its great wave breaks against the mangroves. Let us go and greet it.
Yeah, and that was the closing of The Fire Passage by Lisa Wells. You
Yeah.
can check it out from Four Way Books. If you have any questions for Lisa, please do pass them along. Put them in the chat window, especially on YouTube. That's the one I pay attention to most. It helps if you put question all in bold so I can see it as I'm moving through the questions and comments. But I'll pass anything along if you'd like to ask a question. And I should say, too, if you're enjoying this conversation and the poems, please do click the like button. That's all we ask, but like helps a lot. Poems spread around, helps those algorithms. The sort of ratio between watchers and likers really matters for tomorrow's views. So make sure you click the like button and help us out. And there's some comment or discussion in the comment section about this idea of meaning and how, and clarity, I guess, is what it comes down to. But the question, I'm trying to summarize what people are talking about, But can a poem be successful without meaning? Can it succeed on just sound and insights and not have some undergirding meaning behind it? Is it something that, or is it impossible to avoid? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Does a poem need meaning somewhere?
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this because I'm sort of like anything goes. That doesn't mean I'm gonna personally want to read it. But I don't have any dog in any fight in terms of how people write. I think any poem can succeed on its own terms. And you know, there's never going to be a consensus about what means, how it means. Unfortunately, I mean, I find this when I write the most bare prose. Some of like what readers walk away with was either not intended or nothing I was even conscious of when I wrote it. So, I mean, that's part of the frustration and also the amazing thing about this relationship between writer and reader, because we meet in the middle, you know? Mm-hmm. You have to make the sounds in your mind or reading it aloud, and whatever meaning you make of it completes the circuit in this one moment. The circuit can't be completed if there isn't someone meeting the work halfway. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. One thing I wanted to ask about, because I don't know if we've ever talked about this with a guest before, is what it's like to be at the Iowa Writers Workshop. Because that's sort of so many people, first of all, people feel like if you don't have an MFA to start with, like you'll never be taken seriously. There's that, aspect of just how people feel. But then of that, it's like the Iowa Writers Workshop is on the top. It's like they're the kingmakers, and people, it feels like they teach you networking and that kind of like aspect of like cutthroat.
They really don't.
Yeah. And I think, so what is it like to be there? Is it as people imagine it being very cutthroat, very competitive between students? What was your experience like there?
Ideas. Yeah. And I hope I didn't slag them off earlier. I really wasn't. It's like, and then you start teaching in your own programs and you learn there's always room for complaint. And I think each era and cohort is really different one to the next, I will say. Was it cutthroat? My experience was I made great friends who are still artistic accomplices to this day. And I personally didn't love my workshops, and it wasn't really the professors that I worked with were great. It was sort of like, I don't know, it's like you go on a date with 10 people, and if you don't really want to date any of them, it's arduous to spend 3 hours talking about your poem with them. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, the stakes are so low for poetry. On the fiction side, people were getting $1 million book deals. So I think things felt very different over there. Like what it meant to be there felt really different. Because they bring agents, and people were being scouted, at least in the era that I was there. And a lot of world famous writers were there when I was there, who, were not making rent. So the launch was huge. But for poets, You get like maybe you get lucky and someone picks your book for a prize. Do you need an MFA to write? No. God. I mean, the reason I went is because I'd been, holding a bleach rag for 15 years and I was tired of it. And somebody said, well, if you go to grad school, you might be able to teach, which seemed like an amazing job to have. And I got lucky because I got in there, but I didn't get in anywhere else that I applied.
Hmm.
Um, so I didn't do any real networking, but I do think you can trade on the name, you know, which a lot of
Yeah.
people do. And it's sort of trackable to people who don't have any connection to literature. So if somebody's on your hiring committee who is in the science department and they see that you went there, that might mean something to them, you
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
But God, no, you certainly don't. And so many of my favorite writers didn't seek any, formal training. They came out of the trades or,
Hmm.
out of a forest.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of it goes back to what you said at the very beginning, having all those different careers and lives and things going on to write
Yes,
about and to fuel the passion. You need grist for that. Um, see,
big time.
yeah, a much simpler question, maybe. Molly wants to know, how do you view numbering sections as zero? And that was a strange thing to see in the book. Why that choice?
Yeah. Um, well, I don't know. I thought it might signal to the reader that we're stepping out of the fever dream in those moments.
Hmm.
Because at some point, that was a later edition. Um, when I pulled the book out of the drawer, I felt like I needed some kind of tonal variation so that we weren't just like on this ride the whole time. And so in the 3-0 sections, I kind of step out and it's much more prosy and narrative and describing the circumstances of where we are. I think if this were a play, that would be the moment when the person steps out of character and addresses the audience directly.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. But 0, I don't know. It just didn't disrupt the mounting numbers. Because otherwise this was 1 through 45.
Hmm. Um, let's see. I'm trying to find. There was another question I was looking for. I can't find it. Well, I'll try to find it as I ask this. So you have made documentaries, and you have fiction or nonfiction. I mean, what is it that each of those genres do that the other genres can't? And is there stuff that you learn from nonfiction and from making documentaries that informs poetry and helps your poetry be more successful?
Yeah. Um, for me, poetry, and not for everyone, for me, poetry is much more, not even the reading of it, but when I write it, it's more about going into like, it's more psychoanalytic or something. Like it's about traveling inside. And nonfiction for me is mostly, even when I'm writing about myself, I'm really writing about the world. Um, so I guess I mean, you're writing about the world when you go inside too, but it's sort of a different landscape. Um, that's kind of how I think about it, my own approach. And I think, how do they relate? I mean, for me, it's a healthy relationship because I can like burn out pretty quickly. So I might go all in on a book and focus on it for a few months, and then I need to switch tack. One thing I love about documentary film is it resolves like the torturous aspects of writing nonfiction for me. And that's mainly like description, which feels very fraught. I mean, it's not only hard to do well, but it's very fraught kind of like politically, ethically, like just describing another person. You always get them wrong. If you've ever been written about, you get, you know. You're like, yeah, I did say that, but I didn't mean that. Um, but when you have somebody on camera, it's like the description is done for you. And then, the documentarian, if you're not doing a reflexive documentary where you're like coming along for the ride with voiceover, then you're asserting your vision in the edit. And that's real. I mean, there's nothing objective about it. You're asserting a vision by structuring a story and every choice you make about what gets left in and what gets left out and where you focus and what you speed through. All of those are choices, but it's more like, I don't know what the equivalent would be. It's more collage or like, um, yeah, I think like maybe pillaging your old journals for lines and seeing if you can kind of pastiche something together. Um, yeah.
Yeah. The question I was going to ask before, and it was just a general curiosity from people, was you mentioned in February next year, a book of essays is coming out about poetry. So first of all,
Yeah.
what's that called? And then second of all, like, what is it about? Like, how can you describe the stance you're taking there?
Thanks. Yeah, it's called Delinquents, because I was one. And but also this idea of being like kind of a petty criminal feels connected to poetry to me. You know, getting away with something. I mean, being a writer, you're kind of getting away with something. It's not all bad. Um, yeah, a lot of those essays, I mean, it's a true essay collection. So some of them are just personal essays. Some of them are more personal slash reported. So it's, me being changed by another person I'm writing about. But the whole first section of the book are these essays that I first done in like really rough draft form for the Poetry Foundation about let's see, one of them is about the use of persona or mask for writers. One of them is about uh, early encounters with poetry and, like just being kind of an outlaw kid and how that was good preparation. I mean, I think the end of it kind of calls back to Frost's poem and the two paths that we might take. And like, I felt like kind of confronted with this choice between sitting inside and reading or being out in the world. And thanks to poetry, I could choose both,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes all the difference. So, but then there's an essay about my sister died tragically in 2021 and just kind of the aftermath and how I used language to circumvent grief, which we can be guilty of sometimes, like I think I talked to Ted Conover, that writer, about this. Like it's a strange orientation to the world that you would first assimilate your experience through language. Writers are always like in an experience, but also observing. And there are times when that's suboptimal. And one of them is when you're grieving your only sister. Um, and luckily, writing the essay helped me find my way back to the heart of the
Mm-hmm.
experience. But I had to first kind of go left brain and, use my one tactic for negotiating difficulty, which is writing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're going to do one last poem, and it's a new poem. So it sort of begs the question where you're going in this after Fire Passage. What sort of direction is the newer work taking?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if anyone else out there struggles with this, but whenever I write a poem, I'm like, is this the last one? I mean, it just seems I've been doing this for a long time now, and I never feel like I've made it. Like that it feels so tenuous, that connection to whatever it is that makes the writing happen. And I have so much love and respect for poetry and poets. I think it's the hardest art. I really do. Um, but the poem I had in Rattle was sort of about this legacy of violence that my father was first, sort of the victim of, and then my sister and I. Um, and that's the newest work has been about her, and then also becoming a mother at the same time that she died, and yeah, just what that was like. So this poem is called Oedipal, and the boy in the poem was my 3-year-old, who overheard some naughty language. So if you have tender ears, you should plug them now.
Okay.
Oedipal. When my boy says motherfucker, I hear myself, but I scold my boy. At his age, I would cower between the passenger seat and the dash while my father used his fist to systematically unmake the face of one who'd cut him off in traffic. My father aged out eventually, but in the last of these altercations, a younger man repaid the deed of his thieving a parking spot in a crowded garage by sticking him with a pocket knife below one rib. My father told me not to worry. The blade was small, about the size of the guy's prick. Now that I too am captive in this truck cab, trapped as if by fate behind you psychopaths and languid stoners, staring into your phones, failing to signal or accelerate when the light finally changes, I understand my father's rage was only ever pathetically disguised yet mortal fear. And in this fashion, I am thus ventriloquized. Mommy would murder a man for the crime of traveling in her road. Never mind the warning he carries. I'd sooner snatch out my own eyes than become my father, but that was never the proposition. My sweet boy giggles when he calls me bastard. I hear him with a clarity, like the old long-distance commercial, the bright ping of a pin dropping in each ear.
So that was Oedipal, a new poem by Lisa Wells. Lisa, thanks so much for being a guest today. It's been really fun exploring.
Thank you.
The
You've
fire
asked such great questions.
yeah.
And thanks to the audience. I really appreciate you hearing me out.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Yeah, that was Lisa Wells. You can find all of Lisa Wells' books, The Fix, The Fire Passage, at her website, which is Lisa Wells Writer, just like it sounds, lisawellswriter.com. So find those books there. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to write an after poem to one of the Rattle Poetry Prize finalist poems. Make sure not to take the magic from the source poem. Instead, create your own transformation. So that was your prompt for this week. And if you have a poem like that, you had to submit it by midnight last night for a chance for Katie to invite you on to the show. If you got an email inviting you on to the Rattlecast tonight to share your poem, make sure you check your inbox, then join the Zoom now. And if you didn't get that invite, you're still under consideration for Prompt Poem of the Month, and you can still submit poems on this or any other prompt for May until the end of May. So Katie's going to join us, and we'll be right back with a whole lot more poetry. We're back. Thanks for your patience. I'm here with our creative editor, our prompt lines editor, and my wife, Katie Dozier. How you doing, Katie?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
So the prompt for this week was to write an after poem to one of the Rattle Poetry Prize finalist poems. Make sure not to take the magic from the source poem. Instead, create your own transformation. Mm-hmm. So it's a long paragraph. What did you do? How'd you wrestle with this?
Honestly, because when we did episode 86 and 87 of the Poetry Space where we talked about after poems, I think I almost scared myself away from being able to write an after poem because I picked one that's so loose that I think it doesn't need the reference actually to the source poem in this particular instance, which to me is just like, with the after poem too, you want it to like have a reason to be tied to it. And I think people would be happy to get to read Barbara Lydecker Crane's wonderful poem, Mother and Child. But they also would be like, there is a mother and child in this poem too,
So you got to go far, but maybe
maybe I scared myself too much, I think.
Okay.
All right.
Well, let's hear it.
Chiaroscuro. The only light in the Rothko chapel is born from the roof lantern. It washes the white walls hung with cathedral canvases painted dark navy until it hits my daughter's alabaster skin and she glows as though she is centuries old, a Caravaggio sat cross-legged on a black poof on the floor where she is sketching a sun and I am sketching her. Still life, still life, still life.
Very nice. And I can confirm that poem actually written.
Yeah, but there's a lie in it.
There is.
Guess what Lizzie was actually drawing?
A dog.
Yes. Lizzie only draws dogs.
Yeah, she loves drawing the dogs.
Yeah, and I thought the sun was slightly better for the poem. So
yeah.
But the dog was literally called Cool Beans Dog.
Oh wow.
We'll see you later.
The Cool Beans Dog. Mm-hmm. Well, very cool. Well, I thought that I would write after our own Dick Westheimer's Rattle Poetry Prize finalist poem.
Wonderful.
And I picked it before I even knew what it was. I couldn't remember which one of the ones that we published by Dick was from the Rattle Poetry Prize.
That's quite a list there.
And it was My Father Transformed.
I feel like we should be showing Dick Westheimer, not me. I wish I could crop myself out because I can see his face and he is smiling as I would be too. That's nice.
Yeah, so I just, I did what you should do with an after poem, which is I
copied it
word for word and then changed some of the words like different adjectives
and okay, great.
No, I started like with the idea of the first sentence and then went in a totally different direction. And so Dick Westheimer's it starts in the hospice room. I can't remember exactly how the first line goes, but it's structured similar to this, and then I just ran in its own direction. So here we go. My father unchanged by dying. After Dick Westheimer. I heard about the hospice room. My mind imagined it as a birthing room, but with a green skin of floral wallpaper and a log cabin quilt folded at the edge of the hospital bed. A neutral couch nearby for sleeping, though no one slept. His sixth wife, a concerned blur, standing beside him. My father, though, looked the same, as he always did, middle-aged at the end of the last millennium. I tried to transform his face under all those tubes, but I couldn't. I couldn't even remove his glasses, though someone surely had. It wasn't any easier to see him in his dying than it was to see the child he must have been bicycling through his dreams of the future when he had one. Those two ends of his life as endless as train tracks splitting the iron distance of a desert valley. Standing dead center on a concrete cross-tie at the peak of that stone embankment, the far-off cities they must touch might be Mars or the Milky Way for all they matter. The point's vanishing is the only point, and even that is too fine to see in the swirling dust. So there you go. That was my after Dick Westheimer poem.
Oh, that's wonderful. You wrote that this afternoon then?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's really nice.
Well, thank you.
I'm distracted by the Xfinity guy walking up.
Yeah. Katie doesn't like the Xfinity guy.
Well, he's not even here for us, and he parked right in front of our front door.
It is
and
true.
I like dogs, but he has a dog sitting in the front of his car, and I feel bad for the dog and kind of torn and confused.
He does. And there's this strange thing where the Xfinity went out, then the next day our internet went out.
Yeah, I know. So I'm like scared that something's going to happen. And it's also like 8:20. Why are we doing this anyway?
Yeah. Well, he's taking off. His little dog too.
Yeah, he'll be back.
Okay. Well, anyway, let's go to Dick Westheimer now. How you doing, Dick?
It's interesting that the poem the after poem of my poem. Mine was a prompt poem. From
Really?
yeah,
Interesting.
the prompt that you gave. Obviously, it was in 2021 or 2020, um, but it was to go to a random word generator
Oh,
and
Wow.
wow.
generate. You gave us the random word generator, and I decided to generate 14 words, nouns and verbs, two syllables and less. Um, I think, although Galaxy was one of them, and put them in an order and then make a sonnet out of it.
Oh, wow.
Well, I love that because, of all the types of prompts, I think the random words, people are like, I do prompts, but not ones with random words or like that. So there's some proof so really it's kind of like an after poem of yourself in a way.
Yeah, yeah.
An after, but after.
After. And it did end similarly, with the same sort of like receding distance. So I
Yeah, yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you
Yeah.
for
Hey, Dick,
recalling that
your
poem.
audio doesn't have the usual rich depth. I think you're using the wrong mic.
I don't have the mic in front of me.
Oh, well, there you go. That's better.
It's got an external mic for this computer. Well, and I'm here to do my job, which is to remind folks in just 13 days, we're going to have our community reading. I was just in touch with Francesca this morning, and we're both really looking forward to it. And spread the word. I've been in a couple groups where I've told people it's a great opportunity to write a poem based on a prompt and then come to a reading with some great poets. So let other folks know. It doesn't, I've loved meeting new poets in the community and getting to listen to their work.
Well, it's no accident that the Prompt Lions group, Rattlecast Prompts on Facebook, has grown so much since you started doing them.
It is good. There was again, some lusty discussion about um, what is an after poem, and of course, you weighed in with your going back to, but it's hard. I question mine, although mine is after Erin Murphy's The Internet of Things, and she weighed in and said, "Yep, that's an after poem." And approved of it. But I'd be interested in other folks because it cleaves pretty closely to what she was doing in her poem. So I'd be interested in other folks' opinion as to whether it is stole the magic. So here we go. It is the AI of nothingness after Erin Murphy's The Internet of Things. The empty space left by the moon. The vacated nest in the mulberry tree, the nothingness remaining when the warbler ceases its song, the empty chair when my wife is gone, when she has left her phone on the kitchen table next to an empty bowl, the blank page in her memo book, Google Gemini's spinning icon when I ask where she is, night falling while she's still gone. I look in the field and find her on her knees, weeding blueberry bushes. AI does not know dirt on its knees, the future tense of blueberry buds, the present perfect of a wet kiss, the filling of emptiness with this.
Well, thanks so much, Dick. Katie?
Sorry, I had to go talk to the Xfinity guy. I didn't hear your poem. I feel very bad. If it makes any, though, he said, "Oh, your internet's back on," and I was like, "Sir, my internet was not gone."
Oh gosh, I bet you feel fortunate that he didn't snip
Yeah,
it.
hopefully.
Well, that is the concern.
Yeah, I was like, "Please be on air when I come back inside."
Because it was strange. They were in our backyard. That's when the internet went out.
I know.
But they're just fixing the internet.
I understand. They
Yeah.
still in Texas. There's this thing where like people don't park in your driveway usually, and I don't know if it's. I've never seen that anywhere else I live, and so it's like when somebody does, you're like, wait a second, that's my driveway. I don't know. I guess it's a Texas thing. Anyway, we were fine, and he took his dog. So
Great.
okay.
Okay. Well, great poem
Okay.
by Dick.
Sorry,
Thanks.
Dick. I will look back to it. I feel.
Thank you all. Looking forward to hearing the other poems. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thanks, Dick. Yeah, it was Dick Westheimer with The AI of Nothingness. And let's see. Let's go first to Terry Jude Miller. Hey, Terry. Are you there? Got to unmute.
Speaking of Texas.
Yeah, there you go. We got to keep it in the house.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I was so excited to get the email. Um, I based my poem off of After Gated Community by Alexandra Oliver. The poem's title is Ungated. I never heard the term gated community until I moved to Houston, a farm boy from a place where gravel roads were named for the living, Andropont, Lejeune, Castile, Bergeron, Smith. We didn't know where the Smiths came from. We treated them like they were part of us from the time they moved to our town of 1,100 people. Mr. Smith was the girls' basketball coach and a Baptist preacher. His wife taught freshman and junior English. They never made fun of our half Creole, half English yop. We never questioned their choice to move to this tiny farm town in the ankle bone of Louisiana. No one locked their doors. When people had to leave town for a funeral, folks looked who took turns feeding their livestock and hunting dogs. There were no gates except the homemade barbed wire versions, held in place by more barbed wire. Everyone went to church on Sunday. All the shops were closed except the Dairy Curl and the gas station. You had to buy enough beer on Saturday to make it to Monday, but no one drank very much. Mr. Iron, the town's sole policeman, slept in his car, parked backwards to City Hall, which was one room, a bathroom, and two flags. We didn't have a jail. We never needed one. He listened to classical music. We didn't know where he came from either, but he was ours and we were his. Thank you.
Yeah, great memories there, Terry.
Yeah, Terry, I love a poem that makes you feel like they're your memories instead of the poet or the speaker's memories. And that's how I felt, even though I haven't lived in Texas quite long enough to feel that level of familiarity with it. So thanks for that, Terry.
Well, thank y'all so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Always a pleasure. As Terry Jude Miller with Ungated. Next, let's go to Nancy Tennell.
Am I unmuted?
Yes,
there you go.
hi.
Hey,
We haven't
Nancy.
seen you in a bit.
Yeah, it's great to see
Hi.
you.
Oh, it's so good to be back. I'm through with my travels.
Oh, great.
They were exciting travels, I have to say, from what I
yeah?
got to see.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah. My favorite thing was when you said you had been to the restaurant Au Vieux Comptoir.
Yeah, I had. I was like, wait a second. I know that when you posted that. And I was like, well, we would end up picking the same places.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Well, we had a prompt for an after poem a year or two ago, and it was so easy to do it because I wrote a poem after Wallace Stevens' 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. And so I just took his format and went with it for a sunflower. But this was a little different, the way it was explained about having a conversation about the poem. So anyway, I discovered in looking through former finalists for the Rattle Poetry Prize, a poet that had some final poems, more than one, before I had started watching Rattle, and it's Red Hawk. And so I wrote my poem after his poem, The Never Ending Serial, in Rattle issue 66. And my poem is called Let's Write a Happy Ending. When I was a girl, some mothers taught daughters as they had been taught. Know your place, and if you overachieve, let it be in the excellence of your acquiescence or your beauty, of course. Many daughters were brave, rode a current of change that compelled them to be self-reliant and accountable for each of their wins as well as the losses, with beauty as a bonus, of course. Some daughters were afraid to ignore their mother's words. Their lips spoke change and revolution while coated in the reds and pinks of Revlon, to maintain beauty, of course. If we could give the cereal a perfect denouement, The message to our children might be helpful to them. We'd supply them with confidence to untangle their knots, teach respect for the qualities of character and heart, show them true strength, show them beauty in purest form, so the thundering trains of negativity can't strike them down.
Well, Nancy, I thought that conversation was very apt because, I went back and, of course, looked at the source poem on this, too. And it really did feel like an actual, conversation where you were replying with this poem and going somewhere different, but yet related. So I thought you really hit the nail on the head with the connection, between an after poem, I think.
Oh, thank you. Good. I want to read more of his poems. Well, I read all of them after I found this one. And then it was on the website. One of his was the poem of the day, and I thought, oh, it was meant to be. There's some kind of karma with that, I think.
That's great.
Yeah, we should ask him on the Rattlecast, actually. It's been, I haven't heard from him in a bit, but that'd be great. Well,
All
thanks,
right.
Nancy.
Thanks. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, that was Nancy Tunnell with Let's Write a Happy Ending. And next, let's go to...
Let's go to the Xfinity guy who's sorry here with the poem.
No, let's go to Lisa Bergstresser.
Hi.
Or Liz, I think. Hi,
Can you hear me?
Elizabeth. Hi.
Oh,
Do you
Elizabeth,
prefer
sorry.
Elizabeth or Liz?
Usually Liz, but anything but Sue.
Well, that's good. My daughter's name is Lizzie, so I love the name Elizabeth, and she had a Liz phase that I feel like is going to come back in a few years too.
I don't have a daughter, but if I did, I would have named her Elizabeth because you have so many choices.
Yeah,
And
that's why I picked Elizabeth. Yeah.
Yeah, so good job. You made the right decision.
Well, it's great to meet you. Where are you calling from?
Yeah. St. Louis.
Great.
I do not think that my poem is sufficiently like the source poem, but like I said in my note, I don't think that would be possible because Dante Di Stefano's poems are, every poet is unique, but I think he's especially unique. So I did not even try to copy him stylistically, but I felt like the relationship, that was the more of the after aspect. So I'll go ahead and start reading.
Great.
Brother, after Dante Di Stefano's to my brother. I hope my little brother doesn't tell friends about conversations with his half-sister. The last time we were allowed to be full siblings, I was 5, he was 2. We moved to separate fathers, separate states. It didn't matter that he was the other half of me. 3 Augusts ago, he gave his saved PTO for his nephew's birthday party. Our first visit in years beyond phone calls and texted Talladega Nights clips, while he helped my husband display Pout Pout Fish themed banners on windows and tie teal balloons to dining room chairs. I studied the boy's face and the man he grew into without me. High zygomatic bones atop waning, familiar cherub cheeks, a slightly bearded jaw below the same gemstone eyes. Every time I see him, I whine, height is wasted on the tall, because who needs to be 6'5"? I have no rightful claim to my pride. I worry about losing my son's sweet smile. But Josh is still the little brother who took the blame when I dropped the porcelain music box. He said, I did it, when our mother frowned over ivory shards. He doesn't remember our time in the children's shelter. They had separated us into age groups, despite my constant pleas. He doesn't remember our tiny fingers outstretched as we passed each other's age-organized lines. He forgets the game of musical beds, always the 3 of us, mother, brother, me, together. A rotating bed, sleeping bag, floor or car, apartment, shelter, relative, repeat. He doesn't know what he lost, and it's a mercy. I hope he doesn't say, half-sister. That would be too much and not enough. Sorry, I was a little bit nervous.
Oh, you read that beautifully. No, it was really wonderful reading, and I was very taken with that poem, and I understand that we are all trying to measure up to Dante Di Stefano. I can relate to that too, but I thought that was a really strong poem with wonderful details, and the ending really hits, and I can understand a bit of that and a bit more of your life and feel like I understand. So
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thanks.
so much for
Great to
sharing
meet
that.
you.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was Liz Bergstresser with Brother.
I'm always reassured when someone says I was so nervous, and I 100% can't tell. That was just a beautiful reading. That was great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Let's go to Matt Joseph.
Hi guys, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Matt.
Great to see you,
Hi
Matt.
guys.
Hey.
Great. So I wasn't I actually didn't see exactly what an after poem was, so I just did what felt like an after poem or a response poem to the finalist poem Paris by I think it was Louisa Meridian. I don't know how to say her name, but I love I have two kids, they're no longer little, and it just took me back to the wonderful, terrible time that it represented. And it made me laugh and smile a little bit. So my poem is called Looking Back. I remember holding my daughter's head as she hurled chunks across her dark bedroom until at last she was empty and she looked at me and smiled, I swear, with glee and said, "Daddy, I'm a volcano." And she was, my little red-haired Vesuvius, a forgotten extra from The Exorcist. And I felt a swell of pride dog paddling alongside my own hot nausea. And I remember every time my son would fall into a fever, how he would wilt and fold in on himself like a fresh cut flower stuck under a broiler. I remember sneaking a sip of orange flavored children's Motrin, thinking, nectar of the gods, by God. This is where addiction starts. This is why my children sometimes fake their viral possessions. I remember thinking my days were a run-on sentence with no margins, and the only seconds I could ever claim for myself would come while sitting on the pot. I remember the days of those days, looking back at them now through this open window, my children no longer, the air around me quiet enough to hear the fluttering of a finch, my body still enough to feel the numbered, finite pages in my chest turning over, suddenly filled with more white space than words.
Well, Matt, I have to say the beginning of that second stanza. Can you scroll down so I can read it again? I remember thinking my days were a run-on sentence with no margins. Like, oh, that sums up the early parenthood days so well. And I mean, we still have some days like that for sure here.
Oh, we do, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of them.
It does, and I won't speak long, but it does, and then it feels like all of a sudden you're like, whoa, wait a minute, there's too much space on the page, because the kids are gone, and it's a really weird feeling, and I'm in that phase now. I'm just still making the adjustment, so it's wild. So thanks, you guys.
Yeah, well, thanks, Matt. You really captured it well. And I have to say, Paris was the most popular poem by far.
It was such a fun. It made my wife laugh. It made me laugh. I mean, it's just such a wonderful poem. So it was great.
Yeah. Well,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Matt. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. That was Matt Joseph with Looking Back. Next, let's go to Ashley.
Hi, good evening.
Hey,
Hi,
Ashley.
Ashley.
Having me.
Good to see you.
Thank you. This was such a great prompt. I got to do a lot of reading that I'm surprised I even got around to writing the poem.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But I also loved Alexander Oliver's Gated Community, so I wrote this after his poem, or her poem, sorry. The Other Ashley. Look down the street for the other Ashley, also born in 93. Her house a copy-paste of mine, except there's a staircase leading to her room. Glow-in-the-dark stars across her ceiling, walls her mother let her paint, the darkest blue. Her driveway looks like mine, except with the basketball hoop, where boys are allowed to pass her the ball. She's the kind of rich I want to be, except we have a second fridge in our garage, which another Ashley might count for something. Still, Grandma clips coupons and catalogs each snack that goes into my mouth, not because we're running out. There's rice on every dinner plate. The other Ashley finds it strange, as if we can't afford another side, asks if it's a Japanese thing. In the dining room, I play See Diminished, restless, like the intro to a horror film. I'm in a hurry to get out. Decades later, the house is not sold, but passed to grandkids, living in apartments and moments between paychecks. I never learned the swan song, only good night. Nen nen korio o korio. Sleep, sleep, drift off to sleep, while I sort every little thing my grandparents kept, still saving for us, even when they had enough.
Well, Ashley, I thought this was such a wonderful way to approach an after poem, to like dive into the location and to use gated community, which is a bit pulled back, in its scope and how it approaches the poem, and to instead really plant yourself in this community in another version of you. And I thought it was a really creative way to approach it. And I think a really good rule of thumb for anybody looking to get into after poems, like how can you dive deeper into where this poem was? So I thought it was really brilliant with that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thanks so much, Ashley. Good
yeah.
to see you.
Yeah, so it's Ashley with the other Ashley. Well titled. Let's go next to Michelle Mayer.
Hi.
Hi,
Hello.
Michelle.
Great to see you
Hi.
again.
Yeah.
Good to see you too. It's been a while. Well, I was so excited that you were interviewing Lisa Wells because my poem is after Lisa Wells.
Very
And
smart.
I-
Very
Yeah.
smart.
Yeah, so I actually didn't know that. So
Oh,
it
that's
was
so funny. I thought it was
Yeah.
like
it was a surprise. No, I logged on and I was like, oh, look, it's her.
that's great.
So it was great. It was such a bonus and I loved it. It was such a great interview. Anyway, so it's after her poem called The Accounting. And my poem is called No Accounting after Lisa Wells. Back then, if you got in my father's way, he'd beat your ass, especially if he was watching TV. Everyone knew it. So everyone tiptoed during TV time to protect their unblemished butts. Everyone knew it except for my boyfriend, who was trying to befriend my father by sitting next to him during TV time and talking. Talking! Everyone who was not my boyfriend held their breath or bit their nails or fidgeted with something that didn't need fidgeting with. My stepmother started to whisper babble, something she does when she's nervous because when she quit smoking, she could no longer sit quietly and distract herself with coffee in one hand and a cigarette in the other. I couldn't shush her, and I didn't try because I was too busy watching my boyfriend chit-chat during TV time, and I was too busy watching my father turn his head and smile.
Great ending.
Yeah, I think this does have a great ending. And what I really loved about this too is I feel like in poems we're really quick to move out of moments of tension, but this poem lives like totally within the tension, and it makes us feel like all the more like we're a part of it, because that is like probably what we'd be focusing on exactly if we'd been part of that scene too. So I thought it was really neat in allowing us to sit in the uncomfortableness of that moment for so long. It really, I think, made a really interesting, unusual poem.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And thanks
Michelle.
for having me.
Great to see you.
You too. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle.
Yeah.
So, Michelle Mayer with No Accounting. And last but not least, it's Christiana Doucette.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Christiana,
Excited
great to see you.
tonight. It's been a rougher month for me getting prompt poems written, just very busy at the end of school, and we took a trip up to Michigan to see my grandmother. So it's just been very busy.
And you were busy being on the poetry space, too. So,
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I had that on the schedule, yes. My poem is Why I Am Not a Conductor, and it's after Tony Barnstone's Why I Am Not a Carpenter.
Oh.
And when I started at college, I started as a music ed major. And I was thinking of that with this, because I really did try to be a music ed major. And during conducting class, found that I had a medical issue that wasn't going to let me be able to continue with that. And so as I was reading his, I was like, oh my goodness, this is like, I don't know, that portion of it jumped out to me. So this is Why I Am Not a Conductor. When the maestro cues the downbeat, hand curving the way a bird catches a draft and dives head first, only a quick swerve averts impact. I think of Icarus, rolling beeswax between supple fingers, sneezing as he blows down wishes from the balcony. The sighing reeds sing into the wind as he laughs. The maestro pulls notes from each throat, shapes them in her cupped hand, ties butterfly knots as we ascend sonic zephyrs, rich and round and soaring. She pours harmonies like small murmurations, passing tones thrown part to part, and my heart aches like the overhang of shoulder blade where my tendons clicked and chafed. She holds the timing safe in her soul. But mine were a wooden roller coaster, bumping up a steep track, a sideways jitter through turbulence where sonar said smooth. I see Daedalus, suspended in the afternoon air, Icarus eclipsing the sun, the hot wax sealing his fate, the ring of last light, the youth's delight in every bird call. The hours I practiced, looping cut time, the triangle, the cross I could not bear, a ridge ran me off track, and the ache of overworked muscles intensified. At last, I went to the teacher, sure I must be missing something. She put her hand on my shoulder as I cupped the pattern, then pulled back as strange things clicked in place. Her face turned stern but kind. It shouldn't do that. I swallowed honey and salt, pondered my fault. Thin, torn threads cannot hold molten feathers aloft. Daedalus drew the drowned boy from the sea, planted his body where the reeds sang near the top of a steep cliff. But what of those who never flew? I poured my music into iams, fingers tapping beats my shoulders could not carry, whole rests turned to words, turned to lines like birds rising from fallen trees. With each stanza the breeze rises, whispers, wishes. I catch them with my hand, draw each strand tight, find its final place, and stand tall where I've landed.
Well, Christiana, this is an inspiring poem to me because it's one of those moments where we can look at our own lives and say, like, you know, this actually led me to end up being like this, because I can be like, why did I play poker for a decade? Why did I do that? And it did benefit me in these ways. And so I think that it was a really wonderful turn that you had in the last couple of stanzas there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it picks up a lot of energy too.
Yeah, it
does. Right at the right time. Yeah, great. Thanks so much for sharing that,
Thanks.
Christiana.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
That was Christiana Doucette with Why I'm Not a Conductor after that Tony Barnstone poem.
Yeah.
And now that's going to wrap up the regular portion of the show. Let's close out with a haiku. And what have you got for us, Katie, this week?
I don't know. I have one that I feel like I should have taken one more look at before.
Okay. Well, let's see. This is your haiku
full
for the week.
Disclosure.
Here we go.
Okay. The 16-second fight last year's. So this is in reference to the UFC. It's not a UFC fight. I don't know. I guess MMA fight. It's just the way to refer to it. That was on Netflix between Ronda Rousey and I don't know the other woman's name. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, I almost had it.
Anyway,
Gina.
We watched it. Yeah, and anyway, it was short. But also I was thinking about how it was really long because, you know, both of the women trained for so long to do that and then have a fight that was 16 seconds. So I was thinking about that.
Oh, that's interesting. I was thinking about like a marriage, you know, the one fight that just...
No, but that's what I meant too.
Okay, gotcha.
Not our marriage, fortunately.
No.
But yeah,
Okay.
But a 16-second fight, how you can have the same fight for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Yeah. And now I was at a doctor's office today, and so I wrote some haiku, and there's this waiting room for haiku.
Oh.
Here you go. Waiting room for haiku. That is my little haiku for this week, and that is the show for this week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us and being guests and sharing your poems. It's been a lot of fun. Next week's prompt, the Rattlecast, is going to be what, Katie?
We are going to write a poem that's all about taste. Include a scent, but not the word delicious. I think I've literally said that about not having the word delicious in a food poem before.
It's a terrible word to include.
It's a terrible word. Yeah. And I started to list like yummy and whatever, but it's pretty rare. I have like a limit or something in a poem, so I wanted to make sure it just stops there. But that doesn't mean find a synonym for delicious.
Okay. Definitely good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so a poem that's all about taste. That is your prompt
And
this
taste
week.
has many meanings, of course, too.
That's true. Yeah, definitely
So.
does. All right. And might help to read or watch that interview we did with Ruth Reichel
Yeah.
back for the last summer's issue.
Might help to eat something delicious.
There could do. All right. So that is the prompt for this week. The guest next week is going to be Robert Wrigley. So Robert Wrigley, a very well-known award-winning poet. His most recent book is The True Account of Myself as a Bird. A Montana outdoorsy kind of nature poet. And that's Robert Wrigley. He's going to be a guest on Rattlecast 344 with your prompt poems. Write a poem that's all about taste. That's going to be next Monday, May 25th, the regular time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there. Have a great week. In the meantime, we'll talk to you later. Good night.
Good night.